for like a number of days, he was like walking down the street, and then one day my brother took him out, and so it didn't look like anybody was home. So we actually was going in to rob the house, and then she was there, and he didn't know she was there.
Come on. Loud and clear?
Yes.
It's 1 o'clock and President-elect into you, Felix, that told me to keep going. So here we go. First, I want to greet all our guests. We have any guests today? You want to introduce them? Yeah.
My guest is Rotary Peace Fellow Priscilla Arula. Wait a minute. Arula Prasam. Arula Prasam.
So glad to have you. Katie?
I have my daughter, Laura.
I've got Dr. Jack Benjamin, some of whom you know.
You have two guests, your wife and my wife.
I have my wife and my girlfriend. I'd like to have a moment of silence. We lost another member, a dear friend of a lot of us, Randy Sather, who passed away recently, and he was a vibrant member of the community and of our club for many years. So let's just take a moment of silence. Thank you. To me, it's especially a joyful time of the year, not only because it's spring and we've gotten, summertime and we've gotten water, it's not so hot, but I get to enjoy watching a lot of things, particularly the Olympics. It's something that I enjoy every 4 years, and it's been wonderful so far this year. What we do, go with the program, I'd like to announce we got a very special birthday today. Our own Fred McLaurin has turned 92. Let's wish him a happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Fred. Happy birthday to you. For your service and the service of your family, your boys and your grandkids, we really salute you. What did you say for the Navy and the Marines?
I just want to say, just ignore your age and keep on going.
Don't
listen to what anybody tells you what you should do at your age.
Thank you.
Just drink a lot.
Bill, do you realize how smart he is? Who's at his table?
Of course, yes, all beautiful women.
All women.
Linda, can you give us an update on Saul?
I don't have all the details. Thanks for everybody for signing his card. And for those of you who have not signed his card, please let me know and I'll bring it around. Apparently he had a pretty nasty bike accident in Chicago a couple of days ago. Has gone in for some surgery, and I believe he's going to be home on Tuesday. Bob Woodruff certainly knows more than I do.
Yeah, he's coming back Tuesday. He's left the hospital. He's at his condominium in Chicago now. They're coming home Tuesday, and then a couple of days later he'll go to Duke for the next round of surgery for his leg.
We all people need to be careful riding bikes. I'm really delighted to have Jennifer here for our program. will not be introducing her. Jennifer probably didn't know, I don't know when she first thought of me, but she's a neighbor of ours. And I had seen her for years walking around the neighborhood, didn't know who she was, and she probably seen me walking. And so I happened to notice through the internet or something, a TED Talk, and there was Jennifer, so I watched this TED Talk. And then it led me on YouTube, and before I know it, I was watching 60 Minutes. And so the next time I saw her, I said, Jennifer, why didn't you tell me you were so famous? So we've got a great program coming. I wasn't kidding about being obsessed about the Olympics. I was born in the mid-40s. I started watching the Olympics, as I remember clearly, in 1956, the Olympics were in Melbourne. I'd been a swimmer as a kid, and then later I was in track and field, did shot put and discus. Believe it or not, I was a lot bigger. But it's just so much fun every 4 years to see the world come together. It's such a joyful time. It's such an incredible experience to see all these athletes doing the absolute best performances they can. And the type of fairness, the type of fellowship, and the type of athletic ability is just astonishing. So, I don't know if any of you have kept up with the Olympics like I have. Jan will tell you I'm obsessed with it. I've got 4 screens. and there happened to be I think when I first started watching it, there were 17 events. Now there are 32. Everything from, all the traditional swimming and track, to today they were having breakdancing, which just is pretty amazing when you think about it. They have that, skateboarding, all these. You wouldn't think they were sports, but when you watch them do it, they are incredibly athletic sport. Our women have been phenomenal, and I think the men too. What can you say about the different performances? I always love the different stories that come out of the Olympics. You'll see one guy, a great runner, Bednarik, I don't know if you saw, he got a silver medal in the 200 meter yesterday. He got one in Tokyo. And I don't know if you saw his mother up in the stands with his brother was an elderly, it's probably a white woman in her 50s, who had adopted these 2 boys from a foster home and taken them into her family. They became her sons, and she provided a life for them, and they adore her, obviously. And here he is, one of the great athletes in the world. That's just one story. It's not this story after story that's like that. So anyway, it's fun for me. Great game tomorrow. I think the women played in soccer, and same with you already know all the events. How many people in the room have been to France? Probably everybody. Anybody not been to France? Felix, you've been to France, I'm sure.
Many times.
Many times, okay. Yeah, I think the French people have done an incredible job. How beautiful it can be to see the volleyball there right in front of the Eiffel Tower, the equestrian over at Versailles, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, we'll watch a lot more of it tomorrow. Now it's time to bring on Felix.
Thank you, Bill. Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm a Rotary type strange request. I hope that someone here can help me because I am befuddled. I've got a son and grandson's visiting this week, and one of the grandsons convinced our son to open a small safe that hadn't been open about 25 or 30 years. And if someone here can give me some guidance on how to talk about the smart way to get rid of baseball cards. Which seems to be working $1,000 piece.
So do I. It's something you can.
He does that regularly. So, you got 3 options. All right. Thank you, Jim. We'll respond to your request. Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, my name is Philip. I have the honor of stepping in for President Tim, who is away for well-deserved vacation. I have a few announcements. Thank you so much, Bob and Linda, for giving us an update on our friend and fellow Rotarian Saul. Keep those well wishes coming and sign the card. Also, Karen, we have our guest today, Priscilla from Sri Lanka. We are moving her tomorrow and we need help. We are starting to move at 1 p.m. If you are available, please reach out to Karen Levine for more information. I think right now we have Powerhouse, Lorenzo, and Tom here, but we need more people. So please reach out to Karen and let's help Priscilla tomorrow. Also, we still have a few open slots for the teacher supply store. So if you need to sign up, reach out to me, David, or Tim, and we'll help you out. Anybody else with more announcements? And with that, I'm going to call Jennifer Blair to introduce our guest, Jennifer Thompson. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. First things first, I'm going to ask everybody to double check that your phone is silenced. Last week we had a couple of ringers go off in the middle, so if y'all can do that for me. So Bill already gave a little bit of introduction to our speaker today, Jennifer Thompson, and when I told the program committee that Jennifer had agreed to come speak to us, I got a lot of credibility. They said, wow, you know her? And how do you know her? And you mean like the woman on 60 Minutes? You know her personally? So it is a real treat to have Jennifer here today. And you have her bio there. And what you'll see and what you'll hear is that Jennifer, 40 years ago, lived through an incredible tragedy. And she decided to turn that tragedy into healing for herself. And now she's passing that and paying that forward into healing for so many other people. And you'll get to hear a little bit about how her story transformed into this wonderful nonprofit that you can be part of here. I know when we have nonprofits come up, we ask them to not talk much about solicitation and things like that, but I would encourage you, if you really feel compelled by what you hear in Jennifer's talk today, to reach out to her and see how you can get involved with the life-changing work that she's doing in healing justice. So with that, please come on up.
Thank you, everybody. Now, for those of you who are in the very back, I feel like I'm in school, right? Everybody's in the back seats, but nobody's in the front. If you have trouble hearing me, come on up. So I want to make sure you hear everything. I know that I've got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to kind of do a little bit of cliff note storytelling here. It is such an honor to be here in Chapel Hill. I'm not from Chapel Hill, but I've been living here since 2012. And oddly enough, a few months after the assault happened, I lived right up the road in my brother's condominium for the first couple of months because I didn't have a home to return to, as you can imagine. I am from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I was born in 1962. I was brought up during a time when I was taught that the criminal justice system worked. And it worked fairly, and it worked accurately. And it was a narrative that was given to me because, honestly, of the color of my skin. I didn't have any reason to doubt that our criminal justice system was not the best criminal justice system in the world. Now, that's very different than what many of other people living in the world and in the universe knows, that it doesn't always work fairly, right? I was even taught that the criminal justice system worked so well that it was okay to execute people, right? Because if you did the worst thing possible, you deserve to die. You deserve to die from that. And this was something that I really clung to, I believed in, and I had no reason to doubt. In 1984, I was a college student at Elon College, and I had gone after kind of some really big bumps in the road. I had pretty much dated all the wrong guys, and I went to the wrong university to begin with. And in 1984, at the age of 22, I kind of found myself, and my parents were quite shocked. I was dating the right guy. He was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the dental school. Who would have thought that I would be dating somebody who's going to be a doctor? I was also a 4.0 GPA student. Again, shocking to my family. And I was going to graduate summa cum laude, and I was going to graduate valedictorian. I was doing so well that I was going to go on to get my master's degree at the University of UNCG in exercise physiology. I wanted to be a physical therapist. And I was also living alone. I was working 2 jobs so I could pay my own bills because I wanted to be that girl, that independent, strong woman who could do this on my own. On July 28th of 1984, it was a pretty typical day. My boyfriend and I had gone out to play tennis. We were going to go out to dinner that night and then on to a party. Pretty typical for a 22-year-old college student. I'd gotten very dehydrated earlier in the day by playing tennis, and my boyfriend took me out to an all-you-could-eat Chinese food restaurant because during this time of my life, I could eat like a very, very large man. And so the guys who dated me always took me to buffets. Because for $2.99, I could eat all I wanted to eat. I didn't break your wallet, and everybody's happy. But what I didn't count on was the dehydration and sodium-laced products giving me a raging, massive headache. And so by about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, I told my boyfriend, I cannot go to this party with you. I really feel sick, I need to go home. And he took me home and very politely gave me water and some aspirin, and I fell asleep. And I didn't hear anything after I fell asleep. See, I lived in an old condominium where there was no central air, and every room had those window units. And if anybody's ever lived through the window unit air conditioning, they are so loud, you can't hear anything. So I couldn't hear anything at all that night. I didn't hear the police sirens in the neighborhood, and they were canvassing my apartment complex looking for someone who had attempted to break into my neighbor's apartment around midnight. Thankfully, she was awake. She heard the break of glass. She saw an arm reaching through trying to unlock the door. She called the police, and he ran. I didn't hear the police. I didn't hear anything until around 3 a.m. when I felt this very uncomfortable presence in the room with me. As a single woman, if you've ever lived alone by yourself, you know that there's these moments where you think you might hear a noise. You're not sure if it's really a noise, or if you're imagining it's a noise. And even if you aren't imagining the noise, what would you do? Right? What would you do? And before I could really get my mind together, something brushed in my left arm. And I looked to the side of my bed and saw the top of someone's head. And I could hear him moving across the carpet. I just assumed this was my boyfriend. That he'd fallen asleep, didn't want to wake me up. What a polite young man. But I quickly realized that he never spent the night with me. Never. His mother lived about 1.5 miles down the road. And when he was in town, in Burlington, she needed to know where he was at every minute of every day. So he never spent the night with me. I said, who is that? Who's there? And at that moment, a man jumped up on my bed. I screamed. He covered my mouth with a gloved hand, put a knife to the left side of my throat, and said, shut up, I'm going to kill you. In those moments, those very quick, rapid moments, what I call nanoseconds, your brain is trying to process something really quickly. What is happening? What's happening right now? This has got to be...
Oh, sorry, it's auto flipping.
Oh, why is it doing that? Felix, can you fix me? But I just, so my next thought was, this is someone who's broken into my apartment. Someone who's been in the process of robbing me. And I quickly looked at him and I said, look, you can take my car, you can have my money, you can have my credit cards. Please don't hurt me. I won't call the police, I promise. Just leave. And he looked at me and he said, I don't want your money. And that's when I knew what was going to happen to me. Any woman who's ever been sexually assaulted, who's ever been a victim of rape, knows at that moment, you know what's getting ready to happen. What I didn't know, and what was unclear to me, was I going to die? Was this the last moment on this earth? And strange things start going through your mind. You start wondering what it will feel like when you die. You think to yourself, will it be quick? Will it just be over? And I won't feel anything, or will this take a long time before I die? And how much pain will I feel as I am dying? And then I started thinking about my dad. He was my favorite person. And I could picture my father getting that phone call, being told to come to the hospital to identify my body. I could see him standing over me and saying, yes, that's Jennifer, but that's not the way she looked. And I remember wanting one more moment to tell my father how much I loved him and how grateful I was for everything he did for me. And then something really unusual happened. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I may die, you may kill me, but it won't be here. And it's not going to be on my back. And I began to formulate a plan. I remember hearing somewhere that if you stay calm, you might live. And that's what I thought. Jennifer, you got to stay calm. You have to stay present. You have to stay focused. You have to listen. You got to pay attention. You got to look in his face. You got to pay attention to his voice. You got to look for anything that might be an identifying scar or a tattoo or a missing tooth or something. So later on, if you live, you'll be able to help the police find this person. And so over the next 20 minutes, as he raped me and talked to me and told me things like, you can't see me because you're not wearing your glasses. You're from that town where they burn witches, thinking Winston-Salem and Salem, Massachusetts was the same place. He said, you miss your boyfriend, don't you? It's over in Germany. He'd been reading postcards from my brother as he was backpacking through Europe that summer. See, he'd been in my apartment evading the police. He had been in my kitchen, he had drunk beer, he'd smoked cigarettes, he'd stolen my money, he had gone through my wallet, he knew my name. He even took a photograph out of a photo album and asked me for permission to keep it as a memento. And when I tell you the hate that I felt for this man was palatable. I could feel it coming up to the back of my throat. I hated this man. At one point, he tried to kiss my mouth, and I remember having to turn my head to the right because I was going to vomit. And I didn't want to choke to death on my own vomit. But that would save my life that night. And he said, relax, I'm not going to hurt you. And for reasons unclear to me, I said to him, I have a fear of knives. If you'll get off of me. And walked down the front steps and dropped the knife on my car, and I can hear it hit the metal, I'll let you come back in. And he looked at me very strange. And he said, really? And I knew that the power had just shifted. And I said, I promise. See, I didn't get him off of me because I knew that the police were going to ask me certain questions. They were going to ask me how tall he was. I had to stay close enough to him to figure that out. They were going to ask me how much he weighed. I needed to know that. They were going to ask me what his clothing looked like. I had to pay attention. I had to study. I had to look. I had to remember. He went to the front door and pretended to drop the knife out. Came back and grabbed my arms and said, let's go. And there was no way I was going back in that room. I would die first. And I said, I have to go to the bathroom. Could I have just a moment to use the bathroom? And he told me to hurry up. As I went into the bathroom, I turned the lights on very quickly before he yelled at me to turn them off. But it was a glimpse, because I knew the police were going to ask me, how much light did you have? How close were you? And I began to think, how am I going to get out of this? I can't fit through the window. It's a drop all the way to the laundry room in the basement. I'll break my legs. And then I remembered he had said he'd come through my kitchen, through the back door. And if I could somehow get to the back door, maybe I could run. So I came out of the bathroom, I grabbed a blanket, and I said, I need a drink of water first. And he said, okay, make me a drink and we'll have a party. And I said, okay. And as I walked to the kitchen, he was bending down at my stereo, trying to find 98.7 Kiss FM because we were going to have a party. But again, the light coming off the stereo illuminated his profile, and that was important. Again, it was another perspective. I made my way very quickly to the kitchen. I turned the lights on, and I started making noise with water running and ice cubes hitting the metal sink and cabinets opening and shutting. And I grabbed the blanket really, really tight, and I opened up the back door, and I ran. It's 3:30 in the morning now. It's raining. The grass is very slippery. I only have a blanket, and I don't run. I thought I'll go next door to 27D, my neighbor, and he'll let me in, and I was banging on his back door, not knowing he was gone for the weekend. He came out of my apartment, and he was so angry that I knew I was going to die. So I just did the only thing that made any sense to me, and I just took off running, and I headed towards the light. Because if I could find light, if I could get under the light, and somebody drove by, maybe they could save me and call the police. So I found a carport light on in someone's house. I didn't know who lived there, but I prayed they were home. And I began banging on their back door, screaming, I've been raped. Please, please, please let me in, please. And the gentleman and his wife, who lived in the house with their young children, came to the door. They looked at me and she said, my God, it's one of the students from campus. Let her in. They opened the door, I fainted, they called the police, they brought canines trying to pick up a scent. It had already washed away because of the rain, and I would be taken to the hospital for a rape kit. I had never even heard of such a thing, but my body was now the crime scene, and all the evidence was on me, and it was in me, and it had to be collected, and it had to be plucked, and it had to be swabbed, and put in little Ziploc bags and sealed for evidence. And I can remember seeing them right on there. Saliva, nail clippings, it was parts of my body. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if you could just take my skin, you can have it. Because I don't ever want to feel it again. It was there that I heard a woman down the hall screaming and crying. And I asked the officer in the room with me, the woman who's screaming, is she okay? And he said, no, she's just been raped. Was it the same man who raped me? And he said, yes. And under an hour, in less than a mile, this man had destroyed 2 women's lives. He was a terrible, terrible person. He was a menace to society. He was going to hurt again. And when the officer said, did you get a good look at him? Can you help us? I said, yes, I did, and I want to. Because I have to. Because he has to be taken off the streets. He has to be held accountable for what he did to us. And so I went to the police station, and I began to give a composite sketch drawing, using what they call an identikit, little files of different parts of our face. The eyebrows, the eyelashes, the cheek, the chin, the nose, the lips, the hairline, ears, skin coloring, everything that makes up our face. This is doing it again, isn't it? And when the composite sketch was finished, they looked at me and they said, does this look like the man who raped you? And I said, yes. Okay. It does. And so the composite sketch went in the newspaper. Within hours, the police department was being flooded with phone calls. And the most important phone call was from a woman who said, you know what, that composite sketch looks like a guy I know by the name of Ronald Cotton. As a matter of fact, I saw him around 3 a.m. on July 29th at Brookwood Garden Condominium Complex, wearing a navy blue shirt with white stripes on his sleeves and dark canvas boat shoes and khaki fatigue pants and white gloves on his hands, and that was exactly the description I was given. It was a description of the second woman, and it was the guy. I was called to the police station. Am I doing this right?
Yes.
I was called to the police station 3 days later to do a photographic lineup. Now, I was told, don't feel compelled to choose anybody. The photograph and the suspect may or may not, it's not working. Okay, I'm just going to let this in line. But they gave me 6 photographs, 3 on top, 3 on the bottom. Again, telling me don't feel compelled. This is not going to work. Let me try something. Here. Okay, back to my story. I was looking at the photographic lineup and told not to feel compelled. But again, you're 22 years old, you're at the police station, they've got a suspect, you know that, it's my job to find it. And when I looked at the photographic lineup, it was number 3. And I picked it up and I showed it to the police officers and they said, good job, that's what we thought it was. And that was it. The second victim had not been able to get a good look. She'd been bitten, she'd been slapped, she'd been punched. You put a flashlight in her face, you put a pillow over her face, and she could not make an identification. So I had to do this for her, and for me, and for every woman who would never receive justice. A week after the photographic lineup, I was called back to the police department to do a physical lineup. If you've ever seen a cop show, you know, you walk into the room, right, and there's that one-way glass, right? You're looking at the lineup, they can't see you, but you can see them. But this was not the case for me. That particular summer, the room that they had been using was being renovated. So I was taken to an abandoned schoolhouse, to the top floor, where the only thing between me and the 7 men in a lineup was a folding table. There was no door, there was no windows, there was no way to keep me private, there was no way to keep me safe. It was me, 7 men, and a folding table. Again, I was given the same, you know, don't feel compelled to choose anybody, he may or not be in here, but look, again, I'm looking at a lineup. I know he's in it. I have to find him, and it was number 5. He threw me a little bit because his hair was more of an afro. I didn't remember it being that long. He was wearing brown and not blue, and that was a little bit confusing, but I knew it was number 5. I wrote the number on a piece of paper, and the officer said, good job, that's who you picked out in the photograph. And it was the first time since July 29th I could breathe. Because he was now going to be arrested. He was now going to go to trial. And this would be the most important exam of my life. I had to be prepared. I'm going to stop there. So in January of 1985, we went to court. State versus Cotton. 2 weeks of my life, I sat there and listened to him lie. 2.5 days, I had to testify why my character got assassinated, because women, don't you know that if you go to bed in just your underwear, that invites rape. The jury deliberated 4 hours, came back with the only conclusion, that was Ronald Cotton was guilty of all charges, and Ronald Cotton be sentenced to life in 54 years. And then they tell you, now you get to move on. Now you get to put this behind you, move forward. But there was nothing to move on to or to move forward to, because see, my boyfriend, well, I needed a lot more support than he could give me. And so he didn't want to marry me. And my friend stopped calling me because I cried a lot. And my family didn't want to talk to me about it because it was really uncomfortable. And so the only thing I knew to do was to ingest copious amounts of alcohol and cocaine. Because if I could numb my skin just for a few hours, then I might be able to get through this day, and then the next day, and then the next day. By April of 1985, I was about to die. And I remember coming out of a 36-hour-long cocaine-induced stupor and realizing that if I did die, he wins. And I'm not going to let him win. Life moved forward. I graduated, not summa cum laude, not a straight A student. I didn't go to get my master's degree. I didn't marry the dental student. I moved out of North Carolina. I came back a year later. I met a new man, fell in love, worked in a bank. And in 1987, the Court of Appeals overturned the decision and said that there needed to be a new trial because the second victim had not testified. The second victim could not be sure who her perpetrator was. And maybe my memory had failed. Maybe I was wrong. Ronald Cotton had been in Raleigh, North Carolina serving time, and he came up with this really interesting theory that not only was he innocent, but the person who had committed the crimes was in the same cell block, working in the same kitchen at Central Prison. So in 1987, we went back to court. And under voir dire, they brought this guy in who claimed to have been the actual perpetrator. And the judge said, Mr. Poole, did you commit these rapes? No, sir, I never did that. Did you ever confess to committing these rapes? No, I never said nothing about that. And then they looked at me and the second victim and said, is the person in the courtroom today that raped you? And we said, yes, it's Ronald Cotton. And that was it. That's all they needed to know. But this time, Ronald Cotton will be found guilty of 2 first-degree rapes and will be sentenced to 2 life sentences and 35 years. And again, you have to put this behind you again, because every time the system decides to undo it, you get shattered again, over and over again. And the more you get shattered, the less pieces of you are left to even put back together. I got married in 1988. I got pregnant in 1989. In the spring of 1990, I gave birth to triplets, 2 little girls and a baby boy. And I gotta tell you, like that, as hard as it was, they were my reason to not die every day. Because they needed me. And I had to be okay. And I loved it. I loved all the diapers and the laundry and the skin knees. I loved all of it. And I was good at it. But in 1995, I got a phone call from a detective in the case. He needed to come and see me. And he said, you know, Ronald Cotton is still claiming innocence. And we know we got the right guy, but there's this thing called DNA testing. The state of North Carolina doesn't have any protocol or policies, but if they allow it to go through your blood sample, and that rape kit 11 years ago has disintegrated, you'll need to send it to a new blood sample. I looked at them and I said, look, I have 5-year-old triplets. I don't have time for this. So I'm going to give you my blood, and you're going to run that test, and we're done. Because at some point, there has to be finality. And so I gave them the blood, and it ran down I-40 to Raleigh, North Carolina, the State Bureau of Investigations. They ran the test. I didn't think about it until they came back to my house in June of '95, stood in my kitchen, and they said, hey, you know that DNA? And I said, yeah. It's not Ronald's. It's Bobby Poole's. And people want to ask me what that moment was like for me, but I can't tell you. I don't know. I collapsed. I'm told I screamed and I cried. It was literally one of the worst moments of my life. Ronald Cotton walked out of prison on June 30th, 1995, almost 11 years of being incarcerated, the crime he never committed. And I got really, really tiny. I made myself so tiny that no one would ever find me. And if you can't find me, then you can't hurt me, right? I remember watching television and people would talk to Ronald and they would ask him, what about the girl? Have you heard from the girl? How does the girl feel? And the girl was me. And I was dying. I was literally suffocating and paralyzed on fear and hurt and guilt. Until I just couldn't even breathe. I got a phone call from a producer out of Boston who wanted to do this documentary about the fallibility of eyewitness ID. Would I participate? And I said, are you out of your mind? Like, first of all, how did you find me? And second of all, no. I don't want anybody to know who I am. This is terrible. And he said, well, Ronald's going to tell his story. And I thought, well, then who's going to tell mine? And only I can tell my story. So I decided to participate. But Ronald had to stay in Burlington, North Carolina. And I was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And neither one of us were going to see each other because I knew he was going to kill me. It produced What Jennifer Saw and aired in February of 1997. And I remember sitting there watching it thinking, oh my God. The last thing I said was, I know he's innocent, but I still see his face in my nightmares. And I wanted to know why, and I needed to replace that image. So 2 months later, in Burlington, about 1.5 miles from where I'd been raped, in a Baptist church, pastor's study, I waited to meet this man, Ronald Cotton. And before I could get my thoughts together, Ronald comes into the room, and I started to cry, and I looked at him, and I said, I'm so sorry for what happened. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? And he took my hands and said, oh my God, I forgave you years ago. I just want you to be happy. I want to be happy. And I want us to be okay. And we held hands and we cried together, and we started asking each other questions that only the two of us knew the answers to. For the next 2 hours, we sat together, we held each other, we became friends. And that story would be really amazing if I stopped right there, except the world then found me, and the world blamed me, and the world asked me to carry a burden that really wasn't mine to carry. It gave me a narrative that was really false, and that is that this was somehow my fault. But I carried that, and I lived with it for about 20 years. Until finally one day I realized that, you know what? This is not my fault. This could never have happened unless Bobby Poole had raped me, and the system failed us all. And it started me thinking about the concentric circles of harm and who gets impacted and who gets failed in these cases. Through the years, I have been so fortunate to find myself in community with exonerated men and women, their families, crime survivors in these cases, their families, but also police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, jurors, and people who were harmed because the guilty person was never apprehended. In my case, Bobby Poole went on to commit 24 more violent crimes, 6 of which were first-degree rapes, before he was ever caught. So the community got failed, and we all got failed. And the only winners in these cases are the perpetrators. In 2015, I was given an honor from the Department of Justice's Special Courage Award. And it was that day I decided to launch Healing Justice. We're the only national nonprofit in the country, and we actually think in the world, that is led by people who have been directly impacted, and we work with everyone that has been harmed. And I'm not going to read these 10 things to you all because you're smart and you can read them, but what I realized was restorative justice, which is what Ronald and I engaged in, was really the answer to the harm that had been caused to all of us. And so what I did was I started getting trained in restorative justice and began to run healing retreats with everybody that's been harmed. These are some of the things that we do. I know I'm running close to the end here at the time, but I want to get through just to let you see some of the things that we do in the retreats. These are masks, and we invite people to design masks that they wear because of the harm that we have been impacted by the guilt and the grief that we carry. So what is the mask we wear on the outside? And what is our mask on the inside that's true? These are some of the individuals that I work with. This young woman is from North Carolina. She was 12 years old when she was assaulted in her bed at knife point. The perpetrator was a white male. He went to prison for 17 years before it was discovered that he was innocent. And the interesting thing, why I started off with this idea about the criminal justice system, is in her case, as a 12-year-old, when the wrong guy was arrested, they offered him a plea deal. If he just pled guilty to it, he would get 36 months of probation. Now, he declined because he didn't commit the crime. But think about that. If someone would get 36 months of probation for assaulting and raping a 12-year-old, we're down the road, Mark Cotton received life in 54 years. These are some of the individuals we work with, too. They're, the top one is a case of Oklahoma. A wrongfully convicted individual and the victim from that case who have become very close friends. This gentleman over here is a North Carolina exoneree, Howard Dudley, who spent 24 years in prison for molesting wrongfully his stepdaughter, and then a rape survivor out of Chicago. And both of them become very close friends and actually provide a lot of peer support for each other. And then this is, hopefully it's going to work. It's something that I enjoy showing that hopefully is going to work. And it should pop up any second now. The magician. Let's see. There we go. These are some of the antidotes that we get after our retreats. The individuals that we work with. So that's the end of my story. I'm sorry about the technological things. As much as we love them, they're going to be a disaster. I appreciate you coming out today, and I am available to answer any questions you might have. So,
Be a mic runner today.
Yes, I grew up in Burlington, and I later went to dental school. Who was the dental student?
Yoicks, not sure if I should name him. In the book, he's under a different name. He's not even a dental student in the book. Got it all kind of moved around, but
because I would be at least 10 years older than him, so I may not have even known him. I just thought I'd ask.
yeah.
Never mind, they didn't know.
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Yeah, I was, well, thank you for a very moving story, and I was so moved by it, I failed to understand who the targets are of your nonprofit. Who do you seek to serve? And, what some of the history is about who you have served, or, their decisions and the outcomes.
Yeah, thank you. So currently in the United States, we have around 3,300 exonerations, convictions have been overturned. And we know that in those 3,300, there's family members of those individuals, right? The mothers, the fathers, the children, the siblings, the husband, the wives. And out of the 3,300 wrongful convictions, there's at least 3,300 crime survivors in these cases, and then their family members. So we work with everybody who's been directly harmed. We work with the exonerated, their families, the victims, and their family, but we also work with criminal justice system actors. So we work with police that have been part of a wrongful conviction, hopefully unknowingly, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, jurors. We get a lot of jurors that reach out to us because, imagine being asked to serve on a jury 30 years ago, and you open up the newspaper one morning and you find out this case that you sat on, you got incomplete or untrue evidence, and you've rendered a verdict, and someone's been sentenced to years and years in prison. And so that harm is created to jurors as well as community members. So I put this up here because I think it's important that you understand that this is really a a big problem in North Carolina. We have 75 exonerations just in North Carolina alone.
So to clarify, you're providing healing to people who have experienced this and been injured. Do you do anything to help correct systems to avoid it in the future?
Well, I've been doing that for decades. Been working on particularly best practices as it relates to eyewitness ID. We work in a post-conviction setting. So we work in the whole aftermath space. But part of the work we also do is in technical and training with district attorney's offices, attorney general's offices, conviction integrity units, conviction review units. So we work in those offices, helping the offices understand what victim notification should be looking like when you get ready to call these family members to tell them you're going to undo conviction that they had believed all along was true. Right now we're doing some intense work in Michigan, and we're doing some intense work here in North Carolina as well. So we're working across the country in the training and also in the healing space.
Could you tell me, the actual perpetrator got caught for other crimes, did he get charged, convicted for other crimes, but they didn't go back and convict him of your crime?
That's true. He was serving life in prison for the rapes that he was caught for when he was shot. When he finally confessed and Norman was exonerated, we knew he had cancer and was dying. And so he died in 1999. And it's important to know that in most of these cases, the 3,300 that we're talking about, very, very few of them will ever have a conviction, that the actual person is ever caught and ever held accountable. And in many of the states where there's a statute of limitation on rape and sexual assault, these cases are decades old, and by the time the DNA actually hits on the person who did it, statute of limitations has taken place, and that person is never held accountable. The picture I showed you of the victim and the exoneree that was in one of the photographs, they sat in a courtroom and watched the person who had raped her and almost murdered her literally walk out free because the statute of limitations had taken place, and he was now free and walking the beaches of Mississippi. So these cases, while there's a great outcome for an exonerated individual, finally, after decades, many and most of the crime victims and survivors will never know. Will never know who killed their loved one. And it'll just be a cold case forever.
Jennifer, thank you for a very fine presentation and a great story. Through my wife's work with the Orange Literacy Council, we got to know John Grisham, and who happens also to be a Mississippi State graduate. But we got to know John and his work with the Innocence Project. And I'm just curious, your work is very similar to that, not the same, but have you worked with the Innocence Project and what you're doing?
Yeah, I've worked with all of them. I'll be in Arizona next month working with one there. The difference with the Innocence Projects is that they only work to free wrongfully convicted individuals. But what we've seen and what I know personally, having lived through it, is there was absolutely no one working with crime survivors in these cases. And there was absolutely no services given to individuals that had been impacted as crime survivors. Most of the victims and survivors will tell you that their stories have been completely erased. When you think about opening up the newspaper and you're reading about some of these stories, right? And you look at them and go, oh my God, this is terrible. This guy or this woman spent 20 or 30 years in prison. This is terrible. You almost never know anything about the victims in these cases. So just imagine, I want you to take 1 minute, and I want you to just, in your head, think about the person you love the most in this world. Just think about it. Hold that for me. The person you love most in this world. Now imagine that this person is violently taken away. I'm not talking about cancer, I'm not talking about a car accident. I'm talking about violently removed from this earth. and the system comes in and says, hey, we know who did this, right? And you go to court and you think that the system gave you justice and gave your family justice, and finally, man, this person can be held accountable. And then imagine 25, 30 years later, they tell you, yeah, no, it's not the person. And we're not going to be able to solve this for you. And so you go the rest of your life and never know who did this to your family member. And this is what I tell people. It is a horrible thing to wrongfully convict someone. It is a terrible, terrible injustice. And the harm and the suffering that happens to these individuals and families is unimaginable. But imagine your wife waves goodbye to your children in the morning and somebody kidnaps her and then takes her to a soybean field and rapes her and shoves a stick down her throat to crush her voice box so she can't cry, and then murders her. You can't write her a letter and send her money in a commissary. You can't visit her on her birthday. Like, if you want to see that person, you've got to go to a graveyard. And this is the story of crime victims and survivors. And so as much as I appreciate the Innocence Project, they do amazing work, what happens to the victims in these cases? And I'll tell you what happens to the victims in these cases. They're forgotten. You don't even know who they are. And so that's the work we do. I mean, really the work that compels me is making sure that there's equity in narratives. That everybody's story, everybody's voice gets lifted up. Because it's important. Because when we think about these cases, we can say 3,300, and that's not so big, right? Like, there's bigger problems in the world, but it's not 3,300. It's hundreds of thousands of people that are impacted by this stuff.
Time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, quick one. Has what you've done made you feel differently about capital punishment?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I spent 4 years on death row working with 12 inmates. Most of them are not innocent. But I heard their stories, right, of being children of sexual assault, children of terrible, terrible child abuse, and I worked with them for 4 years in a writing group. So absolutely, it's changed my opinion about capital punishment. Not to mention that I got married to a guy who does a whole lot of work about capital punishment, and he's brilliant, and so, you know, so yeah.
I think we have time for one more. Anybody else have one last burning question? Oh. Sorry. For the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay, real quick. I assume this is a nonprofit. Where do you get your funding from?
Well, private donations, grants that we write for. We have just finished one federal grant. We're working on 2 federal grants that we currently have that are working directly with victims, assistance in district attorney's offices in 3 states. And then we just finished writing for 2 more federal grants through BJA that will give us funding to work, as I said, in targeted areas, and one of those areas is North Carolina. So those 2 grants are specifically for work in North Carolina and Michigan.
And if you want to learn more about healing justice, there's a flyer on the table, and there's our website, so you can visit that and learn more about this organization. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great weekend.
Hey, Tom. Wait, what's happening? Somehow the button was turned on that has like automatic timer. That's what I figured out. But
Oh, hi! I'm Priscilla. I am a Rotary Peace Fellow. I'm from Sri Lanka, and I've been actually working on justice, violence, sexuality, some of them are Sri Lanka justice system and even the and it's very important. As you said, a lot of so disappointed I couldn't do this. I mean,
So while I'm very grateful, I realize a lot of
Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Racing out to a meeting, I just wanted to say hi to Linda really quick. I know. I have to go to a meeting, but I just wanted to say hi again. I'm Erin again. You remember? Yes. Yeah. I know. I saw you across the way. So my daughter's loving the wolf, the NC State wolf. Remember? We beat a wolf from Steve Jones' house. So oh my gosh, it's great. So I just wanted to say hi before I walked out.
Hi, Linda. Hi, nice to see you. I'm fine. Nice to see you. Yes, right. That's right. I'd like to see you at the gym sometime. You still got it? Good. Good news. All right, take care.
All right, get in touch with me. Okay. I want to do whatever you want me to do. Thanks.
Well, you'll be getting information. Katie's been moving her dad, so she knows.
You guys have been slammed. Whatever it works for you.
Well, Jennifer, who is the dental student converting to?
Mike Lupus.
Really? See, I have a sister that's about your age, who's 61. She and Mike went to preschool together, and later he became her dentist after I retired. 'Cause they used to come to me in Raleigh, the office was there. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm amazed at what you've gone through, what you're doing. You're so sweet. Take care.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, for giving that message. Very powerful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I hope I got you a few donations by asking that question. Anyway, thanks very much. I mean,
Thank you for coming.
it's a labor of love.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for coming, and
You're great.
thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Sorry about the technical thing.
We loved it.
Good job, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, have you?
You are amazing, amazing, amazing. Isn't she? Really. A super grandmother, too.
Thank you.
I told Jan that you've been taking care of the how many boys was it? 4? Great.
2 girls and a boy. Oh, my grandchildren?
No, that were just they just left.
No, we're all
Yeah, no, she I saw her last week, about a week ago. I said, Jennifer, how's everything? She says, don't even, I mean, so exhausted.
50 days I've been in the
She's been taking care. No, seriously, they had the 2 families there.
They make you do it.
They let you do everything. I don't know. I just sometimes touch things I'm probably not supposed to touch. Yeah, it was. So good. Are y'all? When you do, I think it's I like the summer.
It's a movie sort of city, so the house is they would get a house and everybody's back.
We'll do everything. I'm so sorry. Sometimes it was like walking down the beach and I didn't really have time for more.